Okay, moving along in the kitchen dinim. Yesterday we were learning the din if you cut a hot piece of meat with a dairy knife, or you cut something dairy with a hot dairy with a meat knife, all the various dinim. Generally speaking, these dinim are complex, but sometimes it's very important to know what is a question. You have to know things that happen. It might be a question. You don't have to know the answer. It's like knowing the illness is part of the cure. So you have to know, in Yiddishkeit, you have to know what is a halachic question to know, be able to, that you need to ask and find out. Anyway, today we're going to learn about, just continuing in the same thing. What happens if you have a pot of milk cooking? Anything dairy, okay, milk. Now a piece of meat falls into this pot. So here you have a pot of milk or dairy food cooking, and then a piece of meat falls in. So if the milk has 60 times the size of the piece of meat, so then it's fine. If it's less than 60 times the amount, it's not fine, because then the taste of the meat through the heat goes into the milk. The taste of the milk goes into the meat. Okay? But if you have 60 times in the milk against the whole piece of meat, now why do you count the whole piece of meat? I mean, it's only taste of the meat going into the milk, but we don't know how much, halacha says, we don't know how much taste went in. So therefore we have to count as if the whole piece, the taste of the whole piece went into the milk. So if there's 60 times the amount, it's good, the milk is good. If not, it's everything's treif. I'm talking if it's hot. It's a cooking, if it's hot. If it's cold, you take it out, rinse it off under cold water, what? Well, one sec. We can't learn the whole Torah on 1 foot. Hillel said to 1 foot, but he didn't tell him these laws on 1 foot. Anyway, so the meat for sure is not kosher. The meat is treif. And you have to throw out the meat, because the meat is really milk and meat together. So that you can't do anything with. Now, what happens though? Okay, what happens if you have a pot of meat cooking? Okay, you have a meat cholent cooking, and some milk falls into this pot of cholent or meat, whatever. So again, if you have 60 times the amount of meat against the milk, it's kosher. If there's less than 60 times the amount, then everything is not kosher. The meat's not kosher, milk anyway became absorbed in the meat. But here there's a very interesting din. So what happens, that's for argument's sake, the milk fell into the pot of meat, but there's not 60 times the amount. Let's say there's only 30 times the amount. Okay? So now everything's treif, right? Everything not kosher. The milk has meat in it, the meat has milk in it, it's all no good. What happens though, if a piece of meat now from this concoction falls into another pot of milk? Now in the other pot of milk, let's say you do have 30 times the amount. So now you have altogether, you have 60 times the amount. So then it's not going to be good. It's going to be, 1 second. If a piece of meat that was not 60 times the milk, okay? So now the milk fell into this pot, okay? Now this piece of meat is treif, because it has milk in it. Now this piece of meat falls into another large part of meat. In order for that meat to be kosher, you need 60 times the whole piece of meat. It's not enough to have 60 times the original amount of milk. Logic would dictate, listen, 10% of milk went into it. Now I have 50% more times the amount, so it should be good, because how much milk? What's treif in the meat? The milk. And now I have 60 times that milk. But the din is, in halacha language, it's called chaticha nasis nevela. This piece becomes treif. this piece becomes not kosher. So if this piece falls into a larger pot, this whole piece is now treif. So you can't look at the milk content in the meat. This whole piece, because it wasn't 60 times in the meat against the milk, so now this piece of meat became completely not kosher, treif. So now you would need 60 times against that piece of meat that fell in. What?
Two-part question. What if you have, you're making like a soup that has dairy in it, tomato soup, and is it just the ratio of meat volume to dairy volume, or do you count the whole volume of the soup, which is mostly vegetables?
Just the dairy. In that case, it would be just the dairy.
So if you only use a little bit of dairy, then only a little bit of meat falling in, you never reach that ratio.
Correct. But I'm saying if a piece of meat falls in, that's 60 times the milk in the concoction, but not 60 times the whole dish.
Well, no, it's the opposite. So you make a soup, it's, let's say, a gallon of vegetable stock and a pint of cream.
Okay.
Soup. If a little piece of meat falls in, the ratio, it's very little cream to a piece of meat, but the volume of the soup is large.
So you go by the volume of the milk dish.
The whole dish.
No. You go by the amount of milk that fell in. And the rest of the thing is also to nullify the milk, correct?
Okay, so it's all together.
Yes.
The second portion is if it wasn't there, could you add more milk?
Okay, so that's another very good question. What happens if milk falls into meat and there's only 30 times the amount? Or meat falls into milk and there's only 30 times the amount? Can I add another 30 times of milk or meat? The answer is you can't. Why? Why? There's a rule, it's rabbinic by the way. There's a rule that the Chachamim said, it's called Ein Mevatlin Isur L'Chatchila. You can't nullify something to begin with. It's only after the fact that it became nullified, so halacha says it's kosher. But you can't nullify something initially because you know what's going to happen? Everybody will keep just that. Wait 1 second. Understand? It's only after the fact it became nullified 1 in 60. But you can't nullify something forbidden to make it kosher. And in fact, if you did, even though biblically it would be good, but the rabbis find you and it's still not good.
Is there a difference between shogeg and mazid?
No. Shogeg and mazid all is only as far as accidental intention is only a difference as far as punishment goes. Not as fact is the food kosher or not. Somebody, accidentally drank poison, you're not going to say, well, because he drank it accidentally, it's not going to hurt him because it's only accidental. I mean, the poison is poison. You're talking about sins, punishment, and it's,
we have a soup, a dairy soup, and a frozen chicken falls in, but just a portion of it, like one leg and the side of it, is actually in the soup.
That's coming up. That's coming up. So right now we'll leave it at that because there's a lot of dinim in that. Okay, so now, so by the way, if you have a pot of cholent, okay, and milk falls in, and it's not nullified in 60, so everything's treif. Now is everything treif. The pot is treif. The pot is also not kosher because now you have a pot that you had meat and milk cooking because it wasn't 60 times the amount. One gender, I'm calling it gender, against the next because it's not nullified. So then you have meat and milk together. It was cooked in the pot, so then the pot would be treif. So that would be a big issue. You have a similar thing, but again, it's completely different. Just to give you an example. If somebody puts, let's say, it's not at all the same din, and I'll explain also why, but just a practical thing. Let's blame it on the housekeepers. Your housekeeper loaded your dishwasher with meat and milk dishes together. Okay? And now they ran a hot cycle. So now you have hot water cooking meat and milk together.
Dirty dishes.
Okay, so again, let's say there were dirty dishes. If you rinse the dishes, that's why when people, let me just explain this story. This happens a lot of times. Hi, Rabbi, my housekeeper put my meat and milk dishes in the dishwasher together. Well, what do I do? Okay. So there's a halachically, I'm not going to tell you what, I'm just telling you a lot of different halachic scenarios. Did they rinse the dishes or not? If the dishes were rinsed, then you can assume there's no substantial meat on the dishes or the milk. So then it's only the absorption, which is much easier than actual meat and milk. Okay? That's number one. Then number two, there's a difference between the vessel it's cooked in. Let's see, if you cook a pot on the fire, meat, and you add milk, okay, it becomes treif. But we learned in Hilchos Shabbos, there's the kli rishon, the pot that's on the fire, in Bishul. Then there's a pot that you poured it into, that's called kli sheni, which is not as hot as a kli rishon. Then you can even have a kli shlishi, okay? So now, let's analyze, I'm not telling you what the halacha is, okay, because it's too complicated, you have to ask a shayla. Let's analyze the water that's coming into the dishwasher. The hot water that's coming into the dishwasher, okay, now where is it coming from? There's a boiler, so you have a hot water tank, right? The hot water is in the boiler, that's the kli rishon. That's the vessel that's on the fire. Now it's going through pipes. Okay? So now it's going, let's say, from the boiler into the dishwasher via pipes. So let's say, again, it could be a million different makeups how the dishwasher gets the water from the boiler, right? But let's say there's a pipe going from the boiler into the dishwasher. Now that pipe is not a kli rishon. It wasn't on the fire. Now that pipe is pouring water into the dishwasher. So that's pouring from a kli sheni. That's pouring from a second vessel, which is not as powerful as the first vessel at all. So now the question is it going to make everything treif or not? That's, again, what?
Is it a cliche because it's not a continuous...
No, it's going from the boiler to the pipe. So the pipe is not the pot the vessel that it's cooked in.
Then how come a spigot like, would that qualify for the same thing? Or
It'll be the same thing.
It would.
Yeah, what?
Just for a record, the dishwasher has a heat element that heats the water even more.
Okay, so that's a different story. So now if you have a heating element in the dishwasher that heats the water in the dishwasher, then you have a bigger problem because now that's the cooking vessel. And it cooks it over 110 degrees, which is Yatzoledes, is enough to make it non-kosher. So you're right. If the dishwasher would have an element that heats the water in the dishwasher, so then the dishwasher is not the third vessel or 2.5 vessels, it will be the first vessel. Then it would be a stricter din. Yeah. Yeah. And generally speaking, when people call you not about dishwashers, but they say, okay, my housekeeper washed by hand the meat and milk dishes together. So that's the question. So the rabbi asks, okay, was the water hot? I don't know. Typical, I don't know. Because the men usually ask the question, they don't know. Now the question, how can you tell if the water was hot or not? So you ask a very simple question. Were they wearing gloves? If they weren't wearing gloves, halachically the water can't be that hot. Because the definition of hot water in halacha is that I would have to pull my hand away, it's too hot. But if I'm using my hands in the water, it can't be halachically hot enough to make a problem. If they were wearing gloves and the water was hot, then you might have a worse issue. But even though it's not the first vessel, it's all this complicated. That's what I'm saying. The purpose is not to be able to make halachic rulings. The purpose is to understand the questions and what makes the question and what makes the answer in a proper way. Okay, that becomes the whole piece of meat. We said if milk falls into meat and the meat doesn't have 60 times the amount, that piece of meat becomes treif. If that meat falls into another thing of meat, you need 60 times that whole piece of meat in the new pot, that for the second pot to be kosher. And if not, it's all going to be a problem. Okay, what else is there before we go on? Okay, that's... Okay, leave it.